The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
You're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Tuesday, December 13th, 2016. Thanks so much for joining us. A lot happening in the news. A pretty eventful day, so we're going to talk about all that as much as we possibly can. Special thanks and shout out as always. I like to start my show thanking my patrons, without whom I could not do what we do here at the Benjamin Dixon Show. So special thank you and shout out to all of my patrons. I think I got some patrons since the last time we spoke. So let me just pull up these files here. 1 second. Want to make sure I thank, or when I say files, I actually mean email notifications, to thank Tyler. Tyler became a patron over the weekend, along with Jamie and Juliana. So thank you all for becoming a patron. If you want to be a patron, for whatever reason, maybe you like the show, maybe you whatever. If you want to become a patron, go to patreon.com/the BPD show and sign up to support the show for like $3, $5 a month, or whatever the case may be. All right. That being said, thank you to Anoa Changa and Brandon Sutton. I got, I almost said stuck, but it wasn't really stuck. It was our schedule didn't work out the way we planned yesterday. And so my baby girl's birthday party, she was born on 12/12/12. Coolest birthday ever. Anyway, my daughter's birthday dinner was pushed back by like an hour. And an hour in my world is a difference between turning in here on 2 wheels, running upstairs, cutting on the lights, and or not doing the show at all. So special thanks to Brandon Sutton and Anoa Changa. Long story short, thank you for sitting in for me last night. Love those two. Love the whole Progressive Army team, David and everybody. So I'm in a good mood, but there's some hard stuff to talk about. So let's start with Aleppo. I want to start with Aleppo because I think it's obviously one of the major things happening today, one of the major breaking news. So Aleppo, and the question that I want to ask honestly is, has Aleppo fallen or has Aleppo been liberated? And the reason I'm asking that is because Syria presents a unique problem for a progressive foreign policy, a progressive worldview, particularly in foreign policy. And we've discussed it at length on the show. And this microphone is like so in a bad position, but we'll make it work. We've discussed it at length on the show because of some of the subtexts that evolves from the conversation on Syria. So let's start with just the headline. Let's start with the news first, rather, on Aleppo. So Aleppo, I believe, has been taken by the Assad forces, backed by Russia. There has been, as of the start of this show, a ceasefire that was called, but all throughout the day, Russian and Syrian forces, with air support from Russia, but Syrian forces have been inch by inch reclaiming the city. The Syrian army earlier today said that they had taken 98% of the territory, but with the ceasefire, Russia has informed the UN that they are going to send in buses to take out the remaining fighters and to lead the civilians there, because, of course, the city is now back underneath the control of government forces. So there's really no need for the civilians to leave, according to what Russia has told the United Nations. So there are about 80,000 civilians who are now still within a few square miles in east Aleppo. that remain underneath opposition control. That is the fluid situation now with the ceasefire and the transition from those forces. Now, and honestly, if you're watching this after 12:13 at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the story is probably totally different. So we'll give you the information, obviously, but this is one of the most time-sensitive issues. I believe at 5 a.m. local time in Aleppo, that's when the buses are going to come in and escort out the remaining fighters. We'll see how that goes. A spokesman for the UN High Commission of Human Rights said that he had been informed that 82 civilians, including women and children, were shot in their homes or in the streets on Monday. Here's a quote. He said, "We have collectively failed the people of Syria." I'm sorry, and this is from the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. A U.S. ambassador to UN, Samantha Power, excoriated Syria, Russia, and Iran for the bloodshed in Aleppo. And this was an interesting exchange. I wish I had the video for this, but I don't have it for you now. But this was an interesting exchange. She said, "Are you truly incapable of shame? Is there nothing you will not lie about? Your barrel bombs and airstrikes, it is your news," she said. To that, Russia pretty much replied, to America, "You're no Mother Teresa." It was okay. It's an interesting rebuttal. So activists said anyone with links to the rebels who seized control of the enclave, they were being hunted down. This is a quote from the Syrian Observatory of Human Rights. They said, "Every hour, butcheries are carried out." And we've seen the videos online. If you haven't, they're kind of chilling to watch of activists / on the ground reporters making their final farewells as the government forces were closing in to reclaim Aleppo. Okay, that's enough. That's enough of the details, because again, by the time most of you watch this clip or listen to the full podcast, some of this would have changed significantly. The conversation that I want to have is the conversation that I've been having with the audience for a while in regards to Syria and American interventionism in general, and the question of a progressive foreign policy. And I think Syria is the perfect flashpoint for this type of analysis. In the backdrop of this analysis, I think we also forget, not just my analysis, but the conversation in general, we forget the human loss of life. And I think most of us forget it in between the argument of anti-American imperialism and interventionism in Syria versus Assad is a bastard who is brutalizing his people and he needs to be taken down. Therefore, we need to be on the side of the rebels. So in between those two arguments really exists the real human tragedy of whoever's doing the particular killing at that moment. And even before I go into any analysis, I think that's the most important thing to realize. If you go into the hashtag Aleppo on social media, you're going to see half of people swearing that any negative news against the Assad regime is propaganda propped up by American imperialism. And then on the opposite side, you have people who are swearing that the only atrocities happening in Aleppo are because of the Assad regime, when in fact, there is some ownership and a lot of ownership to be laid at the feet of the rebels. And the fact that the definition, the breakdown of the rebel groups is so complicated just in Aleppo alone, to actually unpack it not to even unpack it, but to oversimplify it and just say rebels does a disservice to a robust analysis. But forget the analysis. Again, I want to talk about the human life that is forgotten in between the two extremes, competing sides, people who are saying it's all Assad and people who say, no, it's only the rebels. I don't think a person who is facing the barrel of a bullet, the barrel of a gun, really is concerned about who's pulling the trigger as much as the fact that they're about to get killed, or their home is going to be bombed, or they're going to be used as a human shield, right? And so there's these competing narratives of who's really the bastard in Syria, particularly Aleppo. And to me, it's like, why reduce complicated situations into being good guys versus the bad guys and being cops and robbers, right? Like there is a perfectly good actor and there's a perfectly bad actor, when in reality, everybody and their mama got blood on their hands. Everybody. But people have to live in this absolute is kind of existence where it's either black or white. It's good versus evil. Either it is American imperialism's hand is involved, or America is perfectly. And the fact that we even analyze this through the lens of American intervention and America in general all reduces it down to overly simplified analyses that, one, erase the real tragedy of the human life that was lost, and two, doesn't even scratch the surface of what's really happening in Aleppo and Syria in general, and the background, the underlying factors, right? That's what bothers me the most. And if you're, I mean, I don't know who you are, right? I know you're my audience and I appreciate you. But if you're like me, you don't really care about all of those competing political forces when it's real lives that are, people are dying. Now, because my profession is political analysis and political science, of course, got to move beyond the emotionalism of seeing people die. And again, I want to make it clear. I don't care if you're saying that the rebel information is propaganda or the Syrian information is propaganda. Really, at the end of the day, all of it is propaganda. All of it. Because one, and even if we could get the independent journalists in there and the journalists in there, which they can't because it's so dangerous, even if we could have gotten them in there, they still would have been some type of conduit for a form of propaganda, and we would have depended on those journalists to be extremely robust to unpack the propaganda, but we didn't get access with journalists, so everything that we're getting is either being fed to us by the rebels or being fed to us by the Assad regime, both of which is 100% propaganda. Doesn't mean both of them are lies. Doesn't mean all of it is lies. It means that they're going to feed us the information that forwards their narrative. That's how both sides play. And what bothers me about this conversation is that we're quick to say, particularly, I love us. I love the left. I am a leftist. I'm a socialist. I'm over here anti-imperialism as much as the world could actually exist outside of empire. That's a big ass caveat. We'll discuss that later. I'm over here on the left. I love the left, but with Syria in particular, we have reduced it down to being about America and American interventionism and America's empire. And we can't, it's like nobody could understand what was going on in Aleppo except through that overly simplified lens and that American-centric lens. Everything that happens in the global community is not because of America, for America, or anything else, right? It's this inability to see anything except through the lens that America is bad, which forces people in this particular conversation with Syria, and particularly Aleppo. Yes, the rebels who remain after the breakdown of the Free Syrian Army, the people who remain are a mixture of jihadists, of Al-Qaeda, some ISIS. I mean, there are some terrible actors involved in Aleppo. But it's like we've had to weave this, instead of just saying this is a sectarian conflict, this is a protest that turned into suppression of the protests, which turned into a deep civil divide, which turned into a defecting of Syrian generals and Syrian officers defecting and stating that they want to oust Assad, turning into a civil war, being hijacked by Islamists, devolving into a civil war and a sectarian conflict. And now the end of that, we've reduced all of those steps down to being about America. Like, I mean, God bless America, but we are not, I was going to say we're not that fucking important, but we are. But everything that happens in the global community is not because of America. The people, the students who started the quote unquote revolution in 2011, they were, and it goes back to that, right? You even have people who say, well, the original impetus for the Arab Spring was because of the CIA was funding insurrections across, right? Because of the thing that America loves the most is instability, right? Because everything has to be about America. Therefore, America was using the CIA to overthrow and institute regime change. Because, as we all know, the most important thing to America is instability. But I digress. We reduce on the left this down to being about America's footprint in the region, and that is such an overly, grossly oversimplified, reductionist erasure of all of the flashpoints that happened inside of Syria that have led to this point. Even the oil pipeline article by Kennedy, Robert Kennedy Jr., who I'm a colleague of at Ring of Fire, love his work, but that even grossly reduces the, I said oil pipeline, it's a natural gas pipeline actually, reduces this down to being about America. When in actuality, it's you're stripping all those people who fought for their individual reasons. You're stripping and died for their individual reasons, whether we agree with them or not. We're stripping them of any agency. We're just saying, nah, bitch, the only way you could be involved in this is if America paid you, because it's all about America. It's all about Israel. It's all about oil, and it's all about this pipeline. And I do want to say this. America's not that important that we have to define every single thing that happened in the global community through the lens of America. It's not. But I digress. Now, the flip side of that is the fact that what may have started as a collection of students and professors and then eventually officers who wanted to overthrow the Assad dictatorship, right? Let's be sure. Let's not, which is going to be my third point. Maybe I need to break this clip up. I don't know. But we've reduced the other side of the argument, rather, reduces the reality that what started off as one thing has ended as something completely different. Right. They started off fighting for more democracy, the overthrow of a dictator, and continuation of a secular society. And it has, quite frankly, I mean, it's over now for the most part, but it did devolve into a sectarian conflict between Islamist extremists and jihadists. Right. So there is this narrative that has been woven that looks so favorably on the rebels and completely erases the fact that some of the rebels are even more brutal than Assad, right? And we've talked about this so much, but it just blows me away that we can't look at this super complicated cluster F of a conflict without reducing it to being simply Assad is good and the rebels are evil, or the rebels are good and Assad is evil. When in actuality, both of them are bastards. Both groups are bastards. Both of them have killed countless civilians. Both of them have committed and because war crimes is such a specific word, I can't say that both groups have committed war crimes. I will say it's very likely that both groups have committed war crimes. I'll look it up before the end of the show. I know on the Assad side, we can't have this conversation without simplifying it and simplifying the world into being simply good versus evil. And whenever you look at something through a overly simplistic, moralistic view, you miss the forest for the trees. I'm not talking about you, the audience. I know the audience who's listening, you guys are really used to these types of conversations. I'm talking about mainstream media. I'm talking about analysts, so-called analysts. It's like everybody had to pick a side in this. And again, this is the last thing I want to say about the propaganda from the rebels. I saw Twitter accounts that were clearly, blatantly propaganda from the rebels. Clearly. I mean, so bad, so obvious that it would be laughable if it wasn't such a crisis moment, right? So clearly there's propaganda. But what bothers me about this thing is that people have moved into the realm of dismissing anything that doesn't fit their narrative as propaganda. That's the thing. Like I've seen really smart people who I respect and I follow and I read their articles, they're journalists. I've seen them fall into this trope of anything that came out negative against Assad was clearly just propaganda. And let me ask you a question. Do you think Assad went into Aleppo handing out cookies and milk? I mean, clearly, when people said that they were dying, do you think Assad was just going in there saying, hey guys, the fight's over now. Let's all kiss and make up? Or do you think he was going through fucking shit up, shooting people, bombing people, doing everything he could to get back control of the city? So unless you think Assad went through there and just was like, oh, yes, hey, guys, we're totally sorry about the misunderstanding. Unless you think he went through and did that, he clearly went through with brute force and crushed the rebellion, which from the lens of people who are on the other side is an atrocity. So how can we, who are critical thinkers, dismiss every single report from the opposing side, from the rebellion, and dismiss it as American-backed anti-Assad propaganda? Reality doesn't work like that. And by doing that, what we did was we completely erased the people who were killed. And I will say massacred, because you don't want to say massacred because, oh, he was just trying to reclaim his city. If in the process of reclaiming your city, you are gunning down civilians, or you inadvertently kill civilians, it is still a massacre. And this incessant need to rewrite Assad through the lens of anti-American imperialism has pushed some progressives into a corner where the only way they can rationalize it is by sympathizing with Assad. When there is a third option, Assad is a son of a bitch, and the rebels were a bunch of sons of bitches. And in the middle were people who, some supported Assad, some wanted to defect and wanted Assad overthrown. Some people who were pro-rebellion, some people who were pro-government forces. We cannot oversimplify. Every situation is as complicated. Think about how complicated and drama-filled your individual day and life is, and you want to oversimplify hundreds of thousands of people's, hundreds of thousands of motives, and then these individual groups who were the belligerents who were fighting, you want to reduce them down to being just, oh, they're only propaganda from America. I'm sorry. The oversimplification of this situation has been the bane of my existence. which is clearly a first world problem, which is clearly a position of privilege, when my my exasperation with Syria is about how we analyze it versus what's happening there where people are getting killed. All right, enough of me on my pulpit here. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Ben, this is Bryce. What's going on?
What's happening, dude?
So, I know that, we talk about Syria, we talk about these overseas issues. I know you and Nick and everybody, we all get to these debates, and people that get debates in the chat about what's going on. And, I still feel if America stays out of certain situations, it's not about, I guess, that the world be a better place, but I think that America would be in a better situation. Ever since, Bush and Cheney did that crap and disabled the Middle East, it's just been a hellhole. Now, Obama came in and did some good things, but then he also made some mistakes, and it's like a disaster area there, and we can't always go in there and clean up other countries' mess when we got home. Now, at the same time, I do understand your points about, how, important it is with us in America and, different hit and misses. But I don't know. It's a complicated situation because I feel if we stay out, things would be a little better, but that doesn't mean that we'll have major problems. But now that we always go in, it's like the problem make the problem worse. Even though we can't control these crazy people that do messed things to their countries, especially stuff that we do. So it's I understand every side, your side, Nick's side, a lot of people, and I guess it's just a situation that we have to somehow figure it out, some way. We got to figure it out because whatever's we doing now, it's not working.
Gotcha. Thanks for the call, man. 857-600-0518 if you want to get in on the conversation. We're still talking about Syria. We're still talking about American interventionism. And again, I full-throatedly, if that's even a word, reject this oversimplification of people being good. There are no good people. There are no good people on the global stage. There is not. There is no good. There's no such thing as a good government, because government by definition has to use force to maintain its legitimacy, even if it's granted the legitimacy from the people. There's no such thing as good and evil, and people who oversimplify it and reduce it down to that, they're doing a disservice to an actual solution. Very much so, doing a disservice to actual solution. And all these rationalizations of Syria have even from both sides have come from this overly simplistic view that a side is good or a side is bad, a side is great or a side is evil, and it's either about American gas pipelines or it's about America's empire, and it's 100% not about the people who actually started something, saw it hijacked, and turned into a full-fledged sectarian conflict. Anybody who's not discussing that, to me, is doing a huge disservice to the conversation on any conflict, right? And this goes back to this need to have an absolutist view of the world, right? And when I say absolute, that's not really fair. The actual word I'm looking for, a phrase I'm looking for, is a lens through which you can understand the world. And the problem with having a lens that you use to understand the world, it's cool up until the point it's not. It's good up until the point it's not. It's useful up to the point that it's not, because this lens, and I said this earlier, and some people disagree, some people agree. That's life. I said it earlier. You can't make a progressive worldview around siding with anyone who is anti-American imperialism. Because making your worldview making your foreign policy view about stopping American imperialism, no matter who you align yourself with, does put you in league with other imperialists. It puts you in league with other dictators. It puts you in league with other oligarchs. It puts you in league with people who are completely antithetical to your progressivism. So if the only thing that you view your foreign policy through is anti-American imperialism, then you have necessarily, in some cases, put yourself in league with people who are just as much imperialist as America. They just happen to be on the downturn. All states want power. All states expand power. That is the nature of our international order. And to suggest and to think otherwise, to think that just because they oppose American imperialism, that they are somehow noble, just, and good is, and I don't want to just keep saying reductionist, it's and or overly simplified, but it is both. It is clearly both, particularly with Russia, right? Let's be clear. Let's be clear. Russia appears to be on the opposite side of American imperialism, but behind Russia are the same oligarchs, are the same people who enjoy the privilege of oligarchy and the finances and the financial gain of oligarchy. But anyway, believe what you want to believe. Let's take this next caller. You're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Ben, what's up? It's Daniel from Hawaii.
Hey, how's it going, man?
I just kind of wanted to segue into a different mode there, because from what we were talking about, everything you've been talking about so far, it really is based down into ideology. You know, the differences between ideology, the conflicts that come from ideology. And this is the problem when people have their ideology so steadfast and so immovable that they cannot take in any new information and change their worldview around it. Everybody has an ideology. Our ideology is the way that you see the world, in which lens you see the world in. And if you're so fixated on your single ideology that you cannot see the benefits of other people, then conflict and death and war is the only place where I'll ever is. So I also want to say about that, though, is when you look at our own country, and you can see, the same strife going between ideology, of course, not bloodshed or anything, but look at the left versus the right.
Yeah,
look
exactly.
at, the young Turks. The young Turks, even though they do have some really good stuff, Jay Cuder, there's times where he's like, oh, look at this dumb Republican, this dumbass Republican. He just doesn't get it, because he's so fixated on his own ideology, he can't see any of the benefits of Republicans. And vice versa. You look at Fox. Goddamn, Fox is just all about that, They can't see any deals with the left-hand side in what's benefit and what's actually good within this.
Right.
There is good things to be taken from almost any ideology. And there are horrible things to be taken from almost any ideology. We need to find a way to bring the good stuff together and discard the bullshit.
I like that, man. Thanks for the call. I would say I agree with almost everything that you said. Because that's the reality, right? Here's my ideology. Here's my ideology, right? Nobody is good. Period. That's my worldview. That's my galactic view. Nobody is good. Now, is that a pessimistic way to look at the world? No, but yes. Yes, it actually is really pessimistic, but there's always the opposite side. There's always the opposite side of what's being done by somebody, that this is our terrorist or somebody else's freedom fighter. We were freedom fighters, but we were someone else's terrorists. Nobody is good. No government, no state is good. Neither is anarchy, right? So nothing is good. That's my worldview. And the reason I reduced my worldview down to that is because when we start buying into our own bullshit about our ideology, we become just as bad as the people who bought into the bullshit about their ideology. That's the world as I see it. Also, the more nuanced version of that is is the global order in which we live has always lent itself to empires. Look at world history. Empires, to the extent that we knew what the entire world was, like the known world, right? The entire history of mankind, the bulk of it has been about the rise and falls of different empires, the rise and fall of different empires. That has been our existence. And it really boils down to the question of which empire do you prefer? Because, we can be anti-imperialist, and we should be anti-imperialist, but keep in mind, anti-imperialism doesn't have a solution to end all empires. Unless your solution is to just always be in the position of opposition towards empire. Okay. That's one, if that's your worldview, cool. But world history has always lent itself to global empires, what was the known world. And as much as I would like to believe that progressivism has a solution to that, I'm pretty well read on the subject. Unless there's some arcane article that I just missed, I've yet to find any ideological solution to the fact that mankind has lent itself throughout the world history towards empire and towards conflict. And this is from a person who started off as idealistic and as pacifist as you could possibly get. The problem was I actually went to try to find some solutions. And when you start trying to find the solutions to the problem, you have to first better understand the nature of the problem. And then when you realize the nature of the problem, particularly in this conversation, specifically in this conversation, I can't apply this to anything else, but specifically to this conversation of empire and conflict and war. Once you understand the nature of the problem, you get like me and just say, you know what? Nobody is good. Nobody is good. Everyone is simply doing, and they are doing what they have defined to be in their best interest. So nobody is good. Nobody is evil. Everyone is just out here doing stuff. And in the middle of people out here expanding their interests are the people who are killed, who are plundered economically, who are disenfranchised, who are the victims of competing empires. And my last critique of the left, I love y'all, I do. But if your worldview has to make you whitewash Assad, Putin, or anyone else who is a direct counterbalance to American imperialism, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. All right, all right, new conversation. Let's talk about the ridiculousness that is America, right? We've talked about everyone else's problems. We got some pretty damn big problems here in the United States, particularly with our incoming president and some of his picks for Secretary of State and his pick for the Department of Energy. Rick Perry, who I believe it was 2012, he couldn't recall the third department that he was going to abolish. And it was the Department of Energy that he was going to abolish. And Donald Trump has seen fit to appoint him to lead that department, right? You can't get a better team. Like, Donald Trump has put together the perfect team to completely devastate the American bureaucracy and to gut the government. So he's got a team in that regard. So he's picked Rick Perry, former governor of Texas. And here's some things to keep in mind, right? So the Energy Department's budget, part of their budget is designed to maintain our stockpile of nuclear weapons, warheads, cleaning up nuclear waste sites left by military weapons programs. The department runs the nation's national laboratories, sets appliance standards, everything from granting loans for solar programs down to capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The responsibility that Rick Perry has now been given, he's in the perfect position to completely gut any small progress that we may have seen on climate change. And again, I don't want to seem surprised. I don't think anyone should be surprised. As soon as Donald Trump won, you could kind of fill this out. You could fill out the scorecard of what he was going to do. And I always suspected, and we're seeing this in practice, that he was going to lean on the Republican infrastructure and appoint people who are antithetical towards science in general, climate change science specifically. They're going to do whatever they can to roll back Roe v. Wade. They're going to do whatever they can to just renew the culture wars and set us back on marriage equality. They're going to do, I mean, as soon as he was elected November 8th, you could kind of see the future. So this is not shock and awe with Rick Perry, except for the fact that it's a very clear statement about his intentions. Like picking Rick Perry for the Department of Energy is a very clear statement from Donald Trump stating that he has intentions of tearing the department apart. I don't think he's going to be able to disband the department or end the department, but he's clearly putting in someone who has intentions of undermining some of the key things that it does. Abolished is the word I was looking for. So that's one pick. The other side, just trivia. Donald Trump is definitely cucking the entire Republican Party because Rick Perry previously called Donald Trump a cancer, quote unquote cancer, to conservatism. Well, Rick Perry, you are now working for that cancer. So the fuck does that make you? His other pick that we should discuss is Tillerson, I believe is how you pronounce his. Exxon CEO Rex Tillerson. So Tillerson has served as a CEO of Exxon for the past 6 years. He started with the company back in 1975. He's gone through an interesting set of names from and Donald Trump in this respect. Donald Trump has gone through an interesting set of names considering Rudy Giuliani, who's no longer in the running, and Mitt Romney, who had that very awkward picture at dinner subjugating himself to the rule of Fuhrer Trump. But he's rejected both of them, and it looks like it's going to be Rex Tillerson. So in the role of Secretary of State, Tillerson is going to be in the perfect position to expand American empire. Particularly, or I mean, not particularly, because this is how I define American empire, expand our capitalistic exploits abroad, or not just capitalism in general, but specifically big business, right? The oil sector, the major players. This is the perfect job for someone who wants to stake out American interests, and not just American interests. Let me qualify that anymore. Multinational corporation interests, right? Because with Exxon, with most of these large conglomerates, they're multinational, right? They have no allegiance to any nation. So Exxon particularly has no particular allegiance to the United States. He is a great pick if you want to expand. I'm actually kind of tired of talking about the shit that's getting ready to happen with Donald Trump and his picks. I'm kind of tired of it because every day it's going to be somebody else who is absurd. But what is interesting about Tillerson is out of everyone who is fomenting to the top of Donald Trump's pick list, Tillerson is one of the few who actually does believe in climate change science. He actually believes that climate change is real, which in a Donald Trump administration is actually an achievement. He's even gone as far as favoring or being on the side of a quote unquote revenue neutral carbon tax of more than $20 a ton. This is a huge thing for the Donald Trump administration to have someone who has these views. The problem is he's not really going to be in a position to actually do that. Like if he was going to be over the Department of Energy, then maybe his climate change views would be able to be implemented, even though Donald Trump doesn't really quite believe in climate science. But he's not being put in a position where the world could benefit from his pretty moderate and should be the norm views on climate change. No, he put him in a position where he can expand the interest of multinational corporations. So, anyway, these are the people who are going to be leading the nation as of January 20th, 2017. What is interesting, and I'll use this to segue to the next story, what is interesting about all of the Electoral College efforts to basically have Donald Trump not seated as a president and someone else be seated as a president. What's interesting about that conversation is that there's no way in hell they're going to pick a Democrat if they don't pick Donald Trump. There's no way in hell they're going to pick Hillary Clinton if they don't pick Donald Trump. So with this Electoral College challenge, they're going to end up picking another Republican. My question to the world, not even the world, but particularly to the people who are really pushing to have Donald Trump overthrown, for lack of a better phrase, is do you honestly think another Republican is going to pick any different cabinet, or at least the motivations and the inspirations and the agenda? Do you think they're going to pick people who are going to favor climate change science? Do you think they're going to pick people who are going to defend marriage equality? Do you think they're going to pick people who are going to actually defend civil rights and voting rights and, stop you think they're going to put anybody in who's going to stop the suppression of votes? No, they're going to put in people who believe the same things as the people that Donald Trump has picked. So it's like, how do you want your poison? Do you want your poison with a nice, acceptable Republican like John Kasich, who we'll talk about in a minute? Do you want that nice, amenable and Midwesternly friendly Republican who's going to do the same shit to you? They'll just do it with a smile, and they'll do it with some modicum of decency. Or do you want the bombastic orange orangutan bastard who's going to do the same exact thing? Because they're not going to put in Hillary Clinton. I don't know why people are fooling themselves about that. They're not going to put in a Democrat. I mean, technically they could, but can you imagine? I want you to think for a second. Can you effing imagine the unmendable divide that would come if the Electoral College puts Hillary Clinton in the White House? Can you, I don't know of any act that would be as dangerous to America's existence than taking out Donald Trump and putting in Hillary Clinton, than the Electoral College not voting in Trump and voting in Hillary Clinton. I personally cannot think of anything that would be more dangerous to the existence of America from within than an act like that. So therefore, that's why I just conclude it's just illogical, and it's not even a rational action to believe that the Electoral College would vote against or would not vote for Trump and put in Hillary Clinton, or a Democrat for that matter, right? They're not going to put in a Democrat. They're going to put in another Republican. If they put in another Republican, you're going to get the same type of administration. You just get to brag that it wasn't Donald Trump who did it. What's the real point? What's the real point when the next 4 years are going to be saturated with the conservative agenda so much that it's going to probably take us a generation to undo it? I don't think there's a point. I think we just need to start fighting now and stop as much as we can, which is an uphill battle in and of itself. That's a whole nother conversation. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Yes, hello, Ben. This is Jared from Downingtown, PA. Nice
Jared,
to talk
what's
to you
up,
again.
man? Anytime, man. What's on your mind?
Okay. I just want to pivot back just a little bit back to Syria, and then I'll pivot to what you were talking about. So kind of connected together. So we criticize Assad for not being democratically elected and, you know, oppressing his people and all that stuff. But here in America, we have a guy who lost by 3 million votes to Hillary Clinton, and he's going to be the president, and she isn't. And we also have in places like Dakota, we have police like in sort of like an almost June Crow style, like apartheid state, beating up protesters and Native Americans so they can build a pipeline through their lands. So how can we criticize other countries when we're basically just as bad as pretty much any other country? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, Go ahead, finish the thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, you can't say that Putin, you know, he's not democratically elected president, or Syria or North Korea or whatever. I mean, we got, you know, it's really no different than what they got in Iran, where they'll choose which candidates to run, and then then the people choose which of those two selected candidates by the Supreme Council they choose. It's really no different.
Mm-hmm.
So, but to pivot back to what was I getting at?
No, I hear your point on that. And actually, I want to comment there before you go on. Yeah, so this idea that we can't criticize people because America's bad. Like, if I take the energy to criticize America, I'm sure as hell going to take the energy and criticize any conflict that is presented to us, right? I don't really buy into that idea that we can't say anything about someone else. If you're saying America as a nation and as a government has no room to criticize, I still kind of reject that, only because it's like this thing with the cyber hacking. Does America cyber hack? Every day, all day long. Should we sit back and just allow other people to hack us because we hack? I mean, the real world doesn't, in my world, that doesn't work, So, likewise, should America be criticized on so many fronts? I don't have enough time to talk about it tonight. Yeah, and we do that. But does that preclude America from saying X is wrong, and we can all objectively look at it and say, yeah, X is wrong? No, I don't think that should preclude America from actually making a statement. It does it make America a hypocrite? Yeah, that's why I say nobody is good. Nobody is good. Everyone in their own way does play this hypocritical role where we can't see our own bullshit, but we can see everyone else's bullshit. And people like you and me, our job is to call it all out wherever it falls. But go ahead. What's your other point?
Okay, well, let me just, I have a little counter, just slightly. I kind of agree, but in terms of what you were saying about how places like Syria, and I'll also throw in places like Cuba and North Korea, why they're so militarized and, they're police states, a lot of that has to do with the U.S. foreign policy and the capitalist nations, because when places like North Korea and Cuba and Syria when they were created as republics, they were under siege by the Americans, the British, the CIA, all the time. I mean, look at the Bay of Pigs. Look at Operation Northwoods in the United States, which was a documented false flag operation. Look up the Korean War, which was started by South Korea. A lot of people don't remember that. There was a dictator in South Korea who was provoking border skirmishes with North Korea. It's Syria. I'm not even getting into that one again, but we know about the CIA there. So I'm just saying, most of the world's problems isn't caused by America, but I would say 90% of it is either caused directly either by America or the British.
Yeah, I mean, and I can't say I totally disagree with you, but let me, and thanks for the call. So who was the problem before America? The British. Who was the problem for the British? Who was the problem before them? Who was the problem before Rome? Who was the problem for the world history is plagued with empires expanding their territories. You can call it hegemon. If we have this argument in our doctoral program over, is America an empire or is America just a hegemony? And I'm like, I don't care what you call it. In practice, it's the same thing. But I digress. America is riddled. I mean, the world history, rather, is riddled with examples of empire. As soon as you have a government form, right, and you take on the responsibility of protecting your borders, somebody's going to get the bright idea that the best way we can protect our borders is by expanding and growing our strength, right? We can take this back all the way back to the Peloponnesian War with the cities and the escalation of a conflict because of the suspicion of what the neighboring state was going to do. This is a problem that so pre-existed America that I'm 100% confident that it was going to be here after America, right? You know, and all of us won't be here. None of us will be here, but somewhere in 500 years, there's going to be a different empire and people are going to be criticizing it and then making, you know, I don't want to say that. I'm going to stop that sentence. It's going to be here. This is what our world order has always lent itself to. How do we fix that? We don't fix that by overly simplifying it and saying that it's good and it's evil, right? That's the very first thing we have to reject. We have to look at the systems that lend us, who takes us there, that causes this through world history. And just, it's not just me. I have this feeling and the look and the sound of exasperation, but the reality of it is it's well documented that the problem is pre-existed America and it's going to be here after America. And as so long as we're fixated with America is the problem, we never really get down to the problem. I think that's it. That's really what it is. We are so fixated with America being the problem that we never really get to the real problem. And that's where I see so much of progressive and leftist thought stop. It stops with America's the problem. America is just a symptom of the problem. A pretty big ass symptom, I grant you that. But it's just a symptom of the deeper problem, which we can talk about another day. Let's take this next caller and then, oh shit, we're out of time. We're already out of time. I got so many other stories to cover. Caller, but you're on the air. Let's take you. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Ben, am I on? It's Adriana.
Yep, I can hear you. You're live.
Great. Listen, I want to talk about what you tweeted about earlier today about the marijuana in Boston.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I want to say that there's this, what I say is controversial among progressives, but I do not think that it is victim blaming to bring up the fact that a female has been drinking alcohol at the time that she is accusing somebody of raping her. The reason I say this is that the effects that alcohol has on people could make it so that while you think you're mouthing the words, please get off of me, stop, no, I don't want to, what's really coming out is slurred words that may not be understood how you in your brain think that you're saying them, which is why you could have a woman on the stand saying, no, I told him no, and a man on the stand saying, no, she didn't.
Yeah.
So I just want to encourage the young adults of Boston to stop kegging and start toking, because the effects of marijuana are not, nobody ever gets blackout stoned to where they don't remember what they did when they woke up. People's
there have been a couple of times.
When they,
Go ahead.
people, even on that good ass weed, I have never blacked out. People's speech doesn't slur when they're high on weed as it does on alcohol. Their motor skills, their fine motor skills may not be as great, but their motor skills don't mess up to the point where they're stumbling and so forth.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying, and the other thing for guys is because marijuana makes you more sensitive, the little clues that a woman is not liking what you're doing when you're about to have sex with her or having sex with her, you could totally miss when you're drunk. You will not miss those when you're stoned. So
Well,
I
that
just
is
wanted
a-
to say, I think it's great that Boston.
Yeah. No, I think in general it is great that Boston legalized marijuana, and I believe like next Monday you can. It's completely legal for recreational use. I've never, ever heard that argument made in that manner, and I neither support nor condemn your position. I'm just gonna stay the hell out of that one completely. I hope you would understand that. All right. I gotta move quickly from that story. So y'all would notice there are certain topics that I am not gonna broach. I will leave them standing there. Pretty. Yeah. Moving on. Exodus, dude. Last story of the night. This is why I brought up the entire issue of who do you want your Republican administration from? Do you want it from an orangutan, or do you want it from somebody who's nice and pleasant, like John Kasich, right? So John Kasich has signed into law what was known as the heartbeat bill, but the heartbeat section of the bill was tossed out. He has signed into law a bill imposing a 20-week abortion ban. It's been so him shooting down. This is the spin. Him shooting down the heartbeat portion of the bill, which is an insane portion of the bill, has given this pseudo cloud of making him reasonable. The rest of the bill is just as unreasonable, right? It's a ridiculous bill that he signed into law, but because he knocked down the portion that says, well, I think around 8 weeks you can see the heartbeat or hear the heartbeat of a fetus. He cut down that portion, but now he did sign the rest into law. So it's like, does it really matter how nice the person violating your rights is? Because I don't know a nicer guy than John Kasich. John Kasich is he's just a pleasant, I was almost said good, but nobody's good. He's a pleasant guy, and he's going to pleasantly sign legislation into law that infringes on the rights of women. Just as pleasantly as he could, sign that thing into law. And we are saying that somehow the next 4 years are going to be easier if it was run by somebody like Kasich. I don't buy into that. That's why I didn't buy into all of his pleasantries during the debates, because his actual policies are just as detrimental, probably more detrimental, because he'll be able to get even more done because he's such a pleasant guy. But anyway, a little bit more about the legislation. Planned Parenthood called it dangerous. and it blocks a woman from making important medical decisions during their pregnancy. The 20-week ban, this is a quote from Dawn LeGuins. She said the 20-week ban will force women to travel long distances and cross state lines in order to access safe, legal abortions, a barrier that many women simply cannot afford. She is the vice president of Planned Parenthood Action Fund. But of course, the opposite side of the equation is the Right to Life group, who says that saying that that it's going to lead to a lot of lives being saved every year. Surprisingly, I maybe I should take that word back. Donald Trump has come out in support of both measures. So again, I mean, how do you like your rollback? How do you like the rollback of your rights back to the 60s and 50s? Do you like it from someone who is nice and pleasant like John Kasich, or do you want it from an asshole like Donald Trump? When all the things that both of them do are completely an anathema to progress. All right, there's one last story that I want to do and get on the books for tonight. And that is a story out of Mexico. This is one of the most kick-ass, this is a gangster story, like Guerrero, Mexico. One of the many hotbeds for drug lord, gang activity, kidnapping, and executions. There has been an armed militia who has kidnapped the mother of the leader of the Tequileros. I massacred that name. So they kidnapped the mother of the gang who kidnapped citizens. D. Elamonte, the leader of the gang, his mother has been kidnapped by armed civilians who said that they would exchange the drug lord's mother for the people that particular gang has kidnapped. Specifically, one of them is a woman who identified herself. This is according to the Associated Press. She identified herself as De La Paz Duquesne's wife, the engineer who was most recently kidnapped by the gang. She identified herself as his wife and said on a video that the townspeople had the drug lord's mother and the gang leader's mother and would exchange the woman for her husband. She said, quote, "We have your mother here. I propose an exchange. I will give you your mother if you give me my husband, but I want him safe and sound." So the state government has sent in about 220 troops, and they are trying to facilitate the exchange of the two hostages, essentially. And so this is a kick-ass story on so many levels. I mean, they got tired of people disappearing, got tired of people being kidnapped, and so they kidnapped the mother of the gang leader. Now, it is a kick-ass story. But the other side of the equation is when you get your husband, I hope you have some passports to get the hell out of Mexico, because I just don't know how that plays out if you stay in the same city, let alone the country, Yeah, like, I don't know how this ends, but desperate times call for desperate measures. And so they did the first step. I mean, they took a huge risk, and they did it in the most gangster of ways and kidnapped the mother of the gangster who kidnapped their loved ones. So I definitely want to keep an eye on this story to see how this plays out in the immediate. Like, does the transfer of hostages actually go well? And then in the long run, how this particular family actually makes it out in the long run, because some of the most horrific and graphic executions by gangs that we've seen have come from cities just like this. All right, folks, that's all I have time for today. I do offer anyone with a dissenting opinion, please call in. My lines have always been open, 857-600-0518. Particularly people who so vocally don't like the things I say from either perspective, from the left or from the right. Let's get some calls in. Let's get some calls in that we disagree. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for callers who disagree with me so much that they would try to say I'm full of shit on my phone lines. That's what I want. So do me a favor. If you disagree with me, you know where to find me.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.